Hello and welcome to Paranormal Chronicles. I'm your host, Joe Miranda. Today's episode is Rigging the Game. Before we start, I want to say that I'm a flawed man and I'm a sinner. I give God all the glory and Jesus Christ is my Savior. I renounce Satan, but I never underestimate his ability to blind minds, eyes, ears, and hearts here on earth. So, make no mistake about it. From the moment of birth, unless you come from the loins of an elitist, the game is rigged against you. George Carlin said it best. It's a big club and you ain't in it. Now, full disclosure, today's podcast contains a ton of talking points. So for time's sake, I have a cheat sheet up here on my monitor. In this episode, I'll be discussing the great dragon as described in the book of Revelation. I'll also be sharing impressions from the watchers. And to add some context, some years back, my dear friend Craig Perry told me, God needs boots on the ground here on earth to be his eyes and his ears. Now, at the time, I wasn't able to fully grasp the concept. But as time passed and I continued to give my will over to God, I was able to see things more clearly. Then one day, it was as though a shroud had been lifted. And just like that, I was set free, divested of any fear or doubt about my own existence. It was liberating and, beyond description. And it's something I wish for everyone. I believe it's this freedom that has opened up my soul to receive the impressions from the watchers. Impressions are messages that I receive. They are uniquely distinct and they're completely spontaneous. I like to describe it as instantaneous thoughts or groups of thoughts. For example, 1 minute I'll be thinking about what to do for dinner. And the next thing, poof, out of the ether comes an impression. Now, impressions can be meant just for me, or they can be meant for someone that I've interacted with, but they lack the clarity to receive it. An impression can be crystal clear, others can be fragmented, and sometimes the who, what, or where can be missing. That's why I'm always careful about what I share with others. The watchers tend to be a diverse bunch. They can be warm and fuzzy when the mood fits, but they can be extremely impatient, unyielding, assertive, and surly. They are truth and comfort and love, and they want humans to thrive. I also sense that they are extremely protective of us, which would explain some of their reactions. Today won't be about warm and fuzzy, I can promise you that. Now, I may offend the sensibilities of some with what I'm about to share. So, if you're thin-skinned or easily offended, that would be a good time for you to go. What I have to say may go against conventional wisdom. So if you can't or refuse to have an open mind, now would be a good time for you to go. There's a lot to unpack. So let's get started. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 5 years, you may have noticed that the world is a very, very dark place these days. Now, if mankind is to flourish, We're going to need to rip off the Band-Aid at some point and speak candidly about a lot of topics. The watchers must believe now's a good time as any. First impressions I'll be presenting were shared with me in great detail. The rest are far less explicit and may come across a bit disjointed. I'll leave the interpretations of those impressions up to the audience. Now, let's hear from the watchers. The French poet Charles Baudelaire famously wrote, "The devil's best trick is to persuade you that he doesn't exist." Insolence and defiance against God are what got Satan banished from heaven. His prideful ambition is what drove him to convince a third of the angels to join him. The exact number of angels is unknown. Satan's hatred of mankind is rooted in his jealousy and pride of God's relationship with humanity. And it fuels his desires to corrupt and control us. With the help of the globalists and AI, the world is rapidly rushing towards its own enslavement. One thing that stands in the way is the United States, brimming with millions of armed citizens. God bless America. Europe has essentially been conquered. They've been plunged into chaos and economic collapse due to the millions of migrants that flooded into Europe. An operation conceived, planned, financed, and set in motion by the globalists to destabilize the region and seize control. Powers behind the invasion are also responsible for Europe's current gun control laws. Gun laws so stringent that owning anything outside a shotgun or hunting rifle is highly unlikely, and making it virtually impossible for them to end tyranny. In the UK, you can now be cited and thrown in prison for offensive speech. Do you see how kind and compassionate real oligarchs are when they control the guns? Of course, Satan doesn't approve of dissenting opinions. Never has, he never will. The globalists, emboldened after toppling Europe, are now using the same playbook to try and collapse the U.S. They flooded our country with millions of migrants to overwhelm our economy and our social institutions. They hold sway over our lawmakers who chip away at our freedoms and gun rights. And they work to create gun-free zones in hopes of escalating violent crime. George Soros and his ilk have usurped millions of U.S. tax dollars through NGO programs, and they use the funds to install soft-on-crime judges and DAs, as well as activist judges, who in turn unleash murderers, rapists, and thugs to pillage our cities and terrorize our citizens. The globalists don't need a standing army to invade the U.S. anymore. The politicians have opened up our borders, and they've allowed millions of military-age males to pour into our country. All conceived, all planned, all financed, and all set in motion. Not the globalists, but by our own traitors in our government. Our tax dollars are being used to overthrow our own country. Here's a fun fact. Into the 1980s, teenagers throughout the U.S. who drive around with hunting rifles and shotguns in their vehicles. They even brought them on the school property. In fact, up to 1969, the vast majority of high schools, including those in New York City, had shooting teams. Many people couldn't even fathom that concept today. Of course, kids back then were only given 5 or 6 vaccines. Now they get close to 30 by the age of 6. Coincidence? Yeah. Not from where I'm sitting. Not even close. Here's another fun fact. Around 10% of kids between the ages of 5 and 17 are on some type of medication for mental issues. That sink in. 1 in 10 children in the U.S. are on drugs before the age of 18. Think it might have something to do with the chemical cocktails they're pumping into them? It's good news, though. Very good news, right? Pharmaceutical companies are making money hand over fist by providing vaccines and psychotropic drugs for our kids. Just another coincidence? Got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Satan thrives in chaos. Just look around, and all you see is chaos. At home and abroad. Civil unrest in the U.S., civil unrest and a shooting war in Europe, Christians being slaughtered in Nigeria, church and school shootings, protests, and riots. The world has literally and figuratively lost its mind. Or our minds being blinded. Don't close your eyes to the chaos, embrace it. Because there's comfort in the truth. That's an impression directly from the watchers. Truth. They've legalized drugs and lowered our school standards to dumb us down in order to control us. Embrace it, because it's true. Truth. They've installed Marxists, communists, and socialists in our schools and our universities and removed God from them. So our children can hate our country as well as God. Embrace it, because it's true. Speaking of our schools, 8th math teachers from Cienega High School, I think I pronounced that right, in Tucson, Arizona, wore bloodied problem-solved t-shirts for Halloween to mock the death of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk. Of course, the school's superintendent, John Carruth, defended this disgraceful act, characterizing it as just a misunderstanding. Yeah. Classy comeback, John. Your lack of empathy is exceeded only by your narcissism and your arrogance. Truth. These are the same twisted individuals who want to mutilate, groom, and pervert our children under the guise of education. Embrace it, because it's true. Now, a word about a few of our humble politicians. Within the last month, newly elected Democrat Senator from Maryland, Delia Atta, was indicted on 8 criminal charges along with her brother and a Baltimore police officer for allegedly blackmailing 2 former political consultants. Charges include extortion, videotaping the 2 of them having an affair, and placing tracking devices on their vehicles. Those are our leaders. On October 25th, Lamar Cook, aide to Massachusetts Governor Laura Healey, was busted for allegedly having 8 pounds, that's 17 kilos, of cocaine delivered to a state facility. I don't think all that was for personal use. Now, to be fair, criminals and hucksters are prominent on both sides of the political aisle. Recently watched an interview with former North Carolina Republican Congressman Madison Hawthorne. Hawthorne, who incidentally is running for Congress in Florida, said in a recent interview he didn't believe our government could be fixed. I thought that was what he was there for. I had to rewatch it 3 times just to figure out if you misspoke or actually said the quiet part out loud. Are you for real, dude? Why bother running if you don't believe the country can be saved? Unless, of course, you have alternative motives for getting elected. Not that that would ever happen to a politician. It doesn't appear as though our elected officials are going to Washington to serve their country anymore. Instead, it seems like they're all heading to D.C. to cash in their winning lottery ticket. Now, regarding the ever-emerging prominence of AI in our lives, the watchers warn that AI oversight will one day rule over the citizens globally from cradle to grave. They also warn that globalists will use AI to strip us of our rights to privacy and individual freedoms via mass surveillance, inferences and profiling, bias and discrimination, exploitation and repurposing of personal data, exploitation of electrical health records, and AI social scoring. That sounds just like China. You can already see AI beginning to slant dramatically in one direction. It's obvious. In the aftermath of COVID, it's taught us anything. Let's question everything and trust no one. The watcher's level of discernment transcends the human condition. I believe it has something to do with their ability to see into the future. I can always sense when they've picked up on something that's amiss or imminent because they hone in on it with this laser-like focus. And they dissect it to the nth degree. The watchers also warn of dark money being used to infiltrate and destroy conservative-leaning organizations like Turning Point USA, the O'Keefe Group, the O'Keefe Media Group, as well as popular influencers like Tucker Carlson, Mark Dice, Michael Knowles, and others. You see, Satan doesn't approve of dissenting opinions. President Donald Trump, Pam Bondi of the DOJ, and Kash Patel of the FBI. You must, with an emphasis on must, follow through on your promise to expose and prosecute those involved in the Epstein case. I've already discussed the ramifications in Power of Prayer episode regarding that. We'll just leave it at that. The FBI must expose and prosecute the real facilitators behind the Charlie Kirk assassination and cover up, and arrest, prosecute, imprison, and seize the assets of the individuals behind the COVID epidemic. As I stated earlier, Satan thrives in chaos. Expect the rhetoric, chaos, and violence to ramp up even more as a result of the Trump administration implementing their domestic policies. You can bet on it. We're seeing it. It's going to continue. Likewise, conservative influencers are in grave danger, and they will absolutely need to take extreme precautions to stay safe. The Watchers warn that the continued rampant use of illicit prescription drugs and prescription drugs will lead to levels of demonic possession never before seen in mankind's history. It's been impressed upon me that religions of all faiths around the world need to gear up and be prepared for the mass exorcisms that will need to be performed. Now, it's been impressed upon me that just believing in God is not sufficient enough. And going to church, synagogue, temple, or mosque is simply not enough. We must get back to living by the commandments that God set forth for us. It is the only way to reclaim discernment and clarity and lift the scales that blind our minds, eyes, ears, and hearts, because it's happening. God's love is unwavering, people. He believes in us, and He desires our salvation. He yearns for His flock to return to Him. I have no idea where this came from, but when the Great Awakening occurs, many will be overwhelmed and unable to comprehend or accept it as the truth unless they cultivate their relationship with God. These are a few of my thoughts. Regarding the need for God to have eyes and ears here on earth, what if those eyes and ears are a direct portal to God? Proverbs 15:3 reads, "The eyes of the Lord are in every place." With that in mind, will the volume of depravity, suffering, and desperate prayers influence the timing of God's intervention? Is the darkness of the past 5 years behind us? No one knows. But I do know this. The watchers are not to be taken lightly. To that point, one of the caveats was if I did this episode, I would deliver a message to the globalist from the watchers verbatim. I'm going to do it. If anyone watching has an issue with salty language, that would be a good time to leave. You out there, you know who you are. Deep down, you know what you are. Your facade is your smile, your clothes, your house, your title, your family name, your alma mater. You will be brought low in the dust and consumed by the stubble. Your heinous acts are responsible for the death and destruction of millions of families and lives. Repent if you still have it in your heart. Get your house in order. Because it's game on, motherfuckers.